dig into the turbo system. The turbo system on that car was not good. So I had to take it apart, basically do the entire thing over. The exhaust was facing the wrong direction. The intake was taking air in from a really hot place in the engine bay. I have no idea how that car even ran, but the turbo kit definitely needed redoing. So I got a new turbo. It was a Borg Warner EFR 8374, and it's a really cool turbo. It spins up super fast. I bought it locally and it was $1,600. Yeah, it's a lot. After that, I had the turbo piping made completely custom. I essentially helped somebody else do it, and that is Tony, the welding Jedi. He is amazing, and he is a viewer, and now he's a friend, and he's just one of the best guys that I know. He was so dedicated in this project that he would work from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. and then after work, he would come and work at my essentially 2-car garage that we converted into a 1-car garage with a small welding station. And we worked on the turbo kit until midnight every night, and then he had to go to sleep for like 3 hours and then go to work. I have no idea how he did any of that, but he is an absolute MVP. So we got stainless steel pipes for the turbo kit. That's the stainless steel going from the downpipes into the turbo and also the exhaust. That was $500. We have welding supplies, which were $200. That means grinding discs, that means cutoff wheels, that means saw blades, that means other stuff, wire brushes, argon gas, all that stuff. And now we have welding services. Now, Tony didn't want to get paid, and I wanted to pay him. I wanted to give him something. He did spend so much time. So that was $700. Honestly, I don't think it was enough, and I definitely want to make it up to him. We can do a nice fancy dinner, and he definitely will get a ride in the car and drive it if he wants to. Then I had to redo the fuel lines and fittings. And this was a big deal because fuel leak on this car was originally the reason for the fire. The fuel lines were something that I had to make custom, and I had to make 100%. So all the fuel lines and fittings that were on there that were really badly on there and badly designed, they had to leave. So I basically threw all those out. The fittings I still saved, but I didn't reuse them because they were different type of connector. The fittings that I used, they were AN fittings all throughout, and I made sure that the correct diameters were used. I made sure that the correct washers were used, and I made sure that the lines were crimped correctly and there were no leaks. So that cost $500. Another $500 were spent on the oil fittings and lines. We did have to do the oil system for the turbos. We had to reroute some things. We had to basically throw away the oil system that was there, and the oil lines and all that stuff had to be redone. A lot of this cost is basically me ordering fittings, realizing that they don't work, spending 2 or 3 days trying to fit them up, realizing that I need something else, and ordering more. So I have a huge box of fittings at my house that aren't really doing anything other than waiting for my next project. So that cost $500. Then we have the big one as far as fittings and lines are concerned, the intercooler system. So the intercooler system on this car, basically how it works is you have a tank of water. That water gets brought through a pump, and then it goes into a heat exchanger where it gets nice and cool. Then it goes back into the intercooler where it can cool the charged air, because charged air is hotter air. When you compress air, you make it hotter. And when you can cool off that air, that means that you get more boost, you get more timing, you get more power. So I had to redo all of that. It did have an intercooler, an air-to-water intercooler that I did keep, but I had to redo all the lines. I had to redo the tank. So the intercooler fittings and lines cost $1,200. Now the tank itself, I got it cheap, Amazon Prime. That was $100. The intercooler pump, that is that's a monster. It's called a Stewart EMP. It flows basically like a fire hose. I have never had a problem with it. It's a continuous use pump. It's really expensive. I paid $500 for it. But then I had to do the clutch, and the clutch was not working. This car sat for 2 or 3 years, and the clutch just basically welded itself to the flywheel. So I took off the transmission, I just cleaned up all the surfaces, and I popped the clutch out, and then it started working. Now I did have to clean everything back and get new bolts, and the new bolts were $50. Then I got your favorite, some DEI gold tape. And the gold tape was used as heat reflection for the stock heat shields, and also to make the intercooler a little bit better, and just make everything a little bit more efficient. That was $300 I spent on some tape and some other DEI products. I also did 2 oil changes. Now the first oil change was to get all the old oil out of the car, and then the second one was after I did the dyno, 2 oil changes with very expensive oil. I have 20W60 Motul 300V Le Mans racing oil, all together with 2 oil changes and the oil and everything else, the little O-rings that you need. It was $600. So that's a tough pill to swallow when all you're doing is changing oil, especially when the oil is almost brand new. Manual transmission fluid, I also changed that. I have Redline MT90, I believe, so that was $150. Now the tuning was one of the things that I had the most trouble with because, as you know, Lamborghinis are very, very common, and anybody and their mother can tune one of these things. There are like 5 people in this country that can accurately tune a Lamborghini with a twin turbo setup, and 0 of them want to do work on cars that they haven't built. Now Cybex did offer some help in that they referred me to a tuner in Dubai that helped me out with this entire system. He set up everything to get me kind of like a base tune, and they did give me a base tune, so they were a big help on that. But I still needed to do all the groundwork myself and find a person that knows tuning. Now I know a lot more about tuning than I did, but I needed to recruit somebody that really knew their stuff, because the last thing I want is for me to spend all this money on a car and the engine blows up. So I took it to Jeremy from Faster Proms, and he's the guy that does all the cars for Cletus McFarlane. He was local to me, about an hour and a half, and I took the car over there and we tried to get the car tuned. Now, here's the thing. When you try to do a lot of stuff in one day, it doesn't really end up working well, because tuning takes a while. Tuning takes a long time. We had basically a whole day, and to do a idle and drivability and power runs and all that stuff on an unknown system, on an unknown engine. We learned a lot through that process, but we did get some cool fireballs. Fireballs are always good, and I hung out with Cletus McFarlane, and he's just the best guy ever. Also, Jeremy's the best guy ever, so there's no knocking on him at all. I spent about $1,000 on that day. And after that, I got another offer from a guy in Tampa, close to where Cletus is, and he says, hey, I have a Mustang dyno, and you're free to use it anytime you want, and I'm also a tuner. I know how to tune things. I've tuned cars in Dubai, I've tuned lots of race cars, so I know what I'm doing. His name is Eric Cruz, and now you guys know him on the channel. He was actually in my last Lamborghini video, tuning the drivability and idle and all of that. Now, Eric did not want any money for tuning. I came to him and I spent 5 days at his shop, and that's how long it takes. And all we did was we tuned the mid-range and also the top end, so we did get a lot of power. And on his dyno, the car made 620 to the wheels, and on that dyno, it read very, very low. We're talking McLarens that read 400 something to the wheels. So on any other dyno, it would probably read around 800 to the wheels, which would mean 900 something to the crank. And the car definitely feels like an 700 to 900 horsepower car. It is absolutely insane. Eric didn't want anything for the tuning that he did, even though he spent a lot of time. So I gave him my MR2 Turbo project, and I also gave him all the parts that I had. That was a $2,500 value, but I'm not going to count that because now we're friends, and sometimes friends give each other cars that need a lot of work. But recently Eric came by and he tuned the idle and drivability, and he also gave the car a 2-step and also a little bit of pops and crackles when you press the throttle down, and I gave him $300 for that. Again, he didn't ask for anything, and I think I'm probably undervaluing this, but that's how much it cost. Now, I did have to do a lot of wiring in this car, and the miscellaneous wiring supplies, meaning crimps, connectors, and the sensors for the convertible top, which still does not work. I have tried everything. I've gone over every single pinout, and it's really been difficult. But the top can work manually. I can manually put it down, but other than that, it just doesn't work on its own. I think it might be a hydraulic issue where one of the hydraulic rams is leaking, so I'm just gonna have that rebuilt. The miscellaneous wiring supplies, $350. Miscellaneous paint and refinishing supplies, $200. Miscellaneous brackets and metal standoffs. This is so I can mount things like the remote reservoirs. That was $100, so it wasn't really that expensive. Also, the seat belt on the passenger side needed some work. That was $100 on eBay. That was actually not too bad. Then we have the rear convertible tray. Oddly enough, my car didn't come with a convertible tray. It's the big plastic tray that goes above the engine, which the convertible top slots into. That was $800. Then we have the Android head unit, and you guys love the install of this. I did need some modification, but that was $400. Now, the paint and body work is something that I was really looking forward to, and also kind of dreading because you can screw up a paint job real quick. But I ended up taking it to the experts at Eurocar Body Shop in Winter Park, Florida, and they did an awesome job. Now, we did a promotional deal. They did give me a pretty good discount, but what they would charge anybody else is $3,500 or thereabouts. $3,500 for paint and bodywork. It did take about a month or so, but it came out looking very, very good. And even though they did tell me, there are a few things that we'd like to change, so bring the car in when you can, they were really upfront about it, and I wouldn't hesitate to bring my cars there, and I will be doing that in the future. But the next part is diagnosing the car. Now, the car did have some issues electrically. I needed to reset the airbag light. I needed to see what the top was doing, what the sensors were doing, and all that stuff. So in order to do that, I had to get a Windows XP laptop because apparently Lamborghinis can't talk to anything like this. They can't talk to anything new. So I bought a Windows XP laptop on Craigslist for $50. Had a bunch of weird software on it, but I'm not going to the internet, so who cares? Then I bought the Lara software, and the Lara software is a diagnostic, the dealer level diagnostic software for the early Lamborghinis, and that was $1,600. Then you have to find a way to get from the computer to the car, and what you need is called a multiplexer. And I bought a cheap Chinese knockoff multiplexer for $300, which actually wasn't that cheap to begin with, and it did not work. The drivers didn't work, and it didn't work with any computer, and it certainly didn't work with the car. Then I got something else that was useless and expensive, the factory service manual. So the factory service manual on the Lamborghini is just garbage. It's absolute garbage. The pictures are horrible. There's major spelling incorrections. There's lots of wrong information, and that was $500. Then I got the factory wiring manual, which was worse than useless because I had an electrical engineer look at this, and he's like, "Dude, you can't use this. This will confuse you more." So the wire colors were all wrong. It had some weird numbers and weird letters that didn't make any sense. It didn't correspond to anything, so that was useless. That was another $500. So $1,000 on these manuals, and they didn't do anything. And to get the correct multiplexer, I had a viewer just give it to me. It was pure happenstance, pure chance, but I'm so grateful that one of my viewers gave me the correct multiplexer with the correct serial port and all that stuff, and it worked, and I could finally see what the car was seeing and have the Lara software work. But it took a long time. It took like 3 or 4 months for me to get that. And that was free, but it was like a $650 value if I were to actually buy that, which I did try to. They don't make it anymore. And then we come to the AC system. So since the engine had been out multiple times, the AC just didn't have a charge. So refrigerant, O-rings, and a dryer for the AC system were $100. And then I got K&N air filters with the socks that protect it from moisture and water. That was $150. Then we have the transmission oil line, which did spring a leak for some reason. I think I over-tightened it, and I had to fix it with some fittings and a new line, and I fixed that for $50. And then I got a top ECU, and the top ECU is basically just a computer for the top system. I thought that was faulty. It was not faulty, so that was, again, a waste of money. Also, I'm going to add in right now $500 for hydraulic lines that I got from Top Hydraulics out in Oregon. My hydraulic lines, 1 were leaking and 2 were burnt. So I replaced a few hydraulic lines, and that was $500. So to finish the build off, in my mind, I wanted to make the car look as good as possible, and I had to update that rear end, which meant that I had to get a new bumper, new taillights, and new rear panel. Now the bumper was a fiberglass recreation that I got from Poland, and that cost $1,600. The taillights and brackets, that was very expensive, and I work with a company called Eurospares.co.uk, and they sent me over some brand new taillights from an LP570, which really smartened up the look, and they also included the brackets. But even without that, the retail price is $3,300. In addition, the facelifted rear panel is different than the one I got on the car, so I had to get that. It's a fiberglass recreation. I got it on eBay. It was $700. And then I had to do the scavenge pump, which was a pump that takes the spent oil from the turbos, puts it into a T, sucks it up, and then puts it back into the engine via either the oil tank or the valve cover. And that entire setup with the oil fittings and lines and pump and all that stuff and the wiring was $800. And then to top it off, I have a Superleggera wing that I got from a viewer, which needed some work, but usually these wings go for anywhere between $1,300 and $1,800 because they're carbon fiber and they look really good. They're like a finishing piece on the car, but I got mine that needed a little bit of work for $600. So now comes a moment of truth. So I legitimately have not done the sum on this, but let's Let's just check this. So the grand total of the entirety of my spend on this car, $91,450. Now, that might sound like a lot to you, because it is. But keep in mind, we're talking about a twin turbocharged, freshly painted. The wheels are new, the tires are new. The wheels aren't new, but you know what I mean. Everything is refurbished. The car has been rebuilt from the ground up. It's had a turbo kit that is custom installed, a custom tune on it that runs very well, and it's a manual gated transmission, which is just going up in price. So I think for $91,000, you can't find anything like that on the market. So that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I learned a lot today. I learned that I didn't spend $100,000 on my Lamborghini project, and that's always a good thing. But that's going to be phase one. That's the end of phase one. Phase two is beginning for that car. And what that means is we're going to be chasing more power. We're going to be doing race events. We're going to be doing more driving. And we're going to make the car look a little bit different, because phase one looks pretty good. Phase two is going to look even better. But the eagle-eyed amongst you will know that I am not in my house. And the people on my Instagram feed, by the way, follow if you're not followed, they'll know that I am not in Florida. I'm actually in California, and I'm picking up my brand new car. Well, not brand new. I never buy anything brand new, but you guys are going to see it coming soon on my channel. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to hit that bell. And you guys, I think you guys will like it. If you like this Gallardo project, you guys are going to love this one. So until next time, this is me reminding you guys that on cars like my Lamborghini Gallardo with a sketchy past, but we turned it into just an awesome speed machine. You guys need to wrench every day.
It's new. The name's a little bit long though. It's the BMW Concept M8 Grand Tourer. Wow, that's quite some mouthful. Let's take a look and see what it's like. Well, I'm sure you're aware that the 8 Series is due for a bit of a revamp, and with this concept, BMW really want to give us a flavour of what's to come. They're saying that the M stands for more. More everything. More design, more style, more power, more speed, more performance. Well, as is always the case with concepts, we never quite know how much of this is actually going to make it through to production, but you can really see the intention in this car right here. They want to take on Mercedes in terms of providing the ultimate in class, luxury and performance. Are they going to be able to achieve it? Well, again, it really does depend how much of this is going to make it through to production. But if first looks are anything to go by, it's really something exciting that we're going to be very pleased to try out. Well, that's a very brief look at the car. Obviously, with the concept, we still don't know whether this is a fair representation of what's to come, whereas with Mercedes, obviously, we can already sit in their car, and Thomas has, and see what we think of the finished version. But I really appreciate the bold steps that have been taken and that are shown here with the M8. They really are trying to evolve it into something fresh and new. Look at it, it's so aggressive. Those big exhaust ports on the back, the cheeky lift on the little tail of the boot, and the sleek looks from the side. This is certainly not your average business sedan. It's very coupe-like, very aggressive. It's fantastic, and I can only hope that it's just as much fun to drive as it is to look at. This is going to be a very quick preview of the new Nissan Leaf. Why very quick? Well, we're aware that there are already some driving reviews of this car online. We're going to do ours very soon, but we don't want to keep you waiting for now. And as we are here spoilt for choice for cars, and this is such an important one, it seemed like a good idea to take the opportunity just to show you around the redesign so you can get a flavor for it before we get to take it out. Now, there haven't been many cars in history that have divided opinion so dramatically as the last design of the Leaf. What do I mean by that? It was incredibly popular. It's one of Nissan's best-selling models, and it is the best-selling electric vehicle that you can get. The styling is what I mean. Now, okay, you have an awful lot of batteries to fit into any electric car. But seriously, Nissan, the previous one looked a little bit like you described a car to a person who'd never seen one before, given them a piece of paper and said, go ahead, draw what you like. It had its fans. I wasn't one of them. Fair enough. But I think even Nissan recognized they wanted to make the styling look a little bit less controversial, shall we say. And at first glance, I think that they actually have approached that. It's still very definitely a Nissan. The angularity is all still here. And why limit yourself to having black lacquer piano inside the car when you can put it right on the bumper? Again, not my taste, but never mind. Compared with its predecessor, this does look a lot more modern. We still have very sculptural angular headlights, but they look a little bit more intentional now. They look cut into the bodywork rather than sticking out and extruding from it. So I think that's a huge improvement. Let's take a look and see how it runs through into the side. Well, the previous Leaf didn't really give us a huge amount to play with from the side profile. Almost could call it either nondescript, well, you still had those incredibly distinctive rear lights poking right into your field of view. I am really pleased with what they've done here. This looks so much more stylish. Again, I think maybe somebody owes the light designer, which is why every time they redo the car, they still get to have some angularity to it, but they're so much more discreet. The car still keeps its uniqueness right from this nice pitch straight through from the bonnet into the side. That looks so much more natural than its predecessor, and it flows. The previous model most definitely did not flow, and these lights now, instead of looking terribly uncomfortable, look very intentional and completely unique. Good job is what I would say. Nicely done, Nissan. This is a car that I'm not going to be embarrassed to drive. Through to the rear now, and wow, what a change. Now, some people might say, well, I still don't like it that much. I'm not going to say that's the greatest back of a car I've ever looked at, but you know what? Compared to the last Leaf, it's fantastic. Again, it's stylish, it's modern, it feels contemporary. There are many people walking in front of this shop, but we're going to keep going. We're professionals. It really makes a statement, and the statement is, this is a Leaf. It's completely unique, it's not confusable with any other car, but it's also not overblown and too much. I'm really impressed with how they've done this, and I think if they've carried that through to the interior, it's really a step in the right direction. The previous Leaf looked a little bit Spartan on the inside and very, very plastic. I think that they've really worked hard to continue that evolution in style and design in the interior. Look at this! It's a huge improvement. The screen doesn't look so plastic and nasty as the previous one. I don't know if you remember, but it had that fold down screen. It just didn't feel nice, and you could see that breaking really very quickly, so it's nice to see that properly integrated here. You have to bear in mind with this car, obviously, the most important functionality of it is its ability to deliver electric power to you. So you're going to get some compromises, because to bring that in at a price point that's realistic, you're going to need to use slightly cheaper materials on the interior, and that's going to mean a slightly cheaper infotainment system. But really, it looks very functional, and I'm sure it's more than capable of doing the job. The steering wheel feels like a grown-up steering wheel compared to what came before. We now have this full functionality. Here we have a partially digital display. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, in electric cars, that really comes in handy, specifically because we really need to keep up to speed with what the car's battery is doing. And this gives us a lot of features that we like. We've got blind spot detection. We've also got, there we are, tire pressure monitoring. Always a big fan of that. And we have the ability, I think, to set cruise in this one. I believe that's what that is. Hopefully we'll find out a bit later. Other than that, very nice, simple, straightforward air conditioning, heating and cooling controls. This car comes with heated seats. That's a nice touch. We have a USB port, we have an aux in for the stereo, and we have a 12-volt charging point. Now, one of the features of the first Leaf that I was never a fan of, but lots of people were, was the gear knob. And I think that Nissan have really listened to the feedback, because the styling has really quite radically changed, but the gear knob has not. Now, why am I not a fan of this? It's very gimmicky and a lot of people love it. I think the reason is only that I think everything that you touch all the time when you drive should be made of the best materials you can. And I just always felt that if this had been made of something like a brushed aluminium, it would feel and resonate with quality. Whereas the plastic, you can't get around it, feels like plastic. But now with this black finish and this blue lighting around the side, it certainly looks a lot better. It looks better quality, a nicer finish. If they'd surrounded it in anything other than this fingerprint magnet, then I'd be really happy with it. Come on, I'm being picky. You've got everything you need. We've got cup holders back here and pretty decent storage bin as well. Again, this car was really never intended about providing people with a luxury drive, but that said, the drive in the predecessor was always very, very good. This one I'm hoping can only be better, but in terms of the way that the style has changed, I think you can say that the Leaf has grown up. I think for me, one of the things that I've always liked most about the Leaf is that where other manufacturers have been pursuing making bigger, making faster, Nissan, I really think we're pioneers in terms of saying, look, electric can be for everyone, and we can make a very credible car. We can give you a small car that will achieve everything you would expect from a small car on an electric platform.